Product People live community event. We're really very happy that you have decided to spend your Tuesday night with us here just for the next few minutes. What we'll be talking about tonight is uncovering hidden user needs with Tomas. And I practiced his surname with him just before this call, and I think it's Pinjusic. No, I think I still said it incorrectly, but Tomas is going to be talking to us today about uncovering hidden user needs. Just before we jump into that, I'll just quickly like to introduce myself. My name is Stefan. I'm a senior product management consultant at Product People. I originally come from South Africa, but right now I live in Berlin. And then you can see just some of my experience here on the side. I'm not going to read through that. If you want to, you can go on YouTube and pause at this part and read through it. And then something quickly about Product People. So how we make money is we're an interim product management consultancy. So we have product leaders, product managers, product ops, and we have 42 in-house employees that we send out to different clients to go and solve their interim product management needs. And then what you're here with tonight and what you're seeing tonight is how we give back. If you're watching this, you're part of one of Europe's largest PM communities with about 30,000 members. And we want to say thank you for being part of that community and being here tonight. So just to get into the actual topic and to warm you up a little bit, Tomas has asked us to ask you two questions that you can think through and get your brain in that space of uncovering user needs. So if you're on Zoom, you'll see that a poll will be popping up and you can make your selections directly on the poll. If you're on LinkedIn or you're on YouTube, then you can let us know your answers in the comment box of the video. So the first question is, how often do you do user research? And you have three possible answers here. One is yes, I use it often. Second one is I've heard about it, but I've never properly done user research. And the third answer is I've heard about it and would like to learn more. And then the second question is, what do you find is the biggest challenge to doing more user research? And here you have four options. So A is lack of knowledge, frameworks on how to do it. B is lack of time to dedicate to it. C is no close relationships with the users. And D, other. So I think the poll on Zoom should be popping up soon. And then
we're experiencing some issues on Zoom, so with the poll.
Cool. Thanks, Leo. So everyone can just post it in the chat for us. Then we'll see your answers to the questions as well. If you have question 2 and it's what do you find is the biggest challenge to doing more user research, and your option is something else, number D, other, then also let us know what those other reasons are, and start thinking through them as well. From my perspective, how often do I do user research? Typically, it would usually depend a little bit on the company that I work in or the client that I have. Sometimes we have a user researcher who likes to do the things themselves, or they set us up to kind of help them and get more out as well. So I kind of have used it quite often, and I think it's super, super helpful. If you're on Zoom, you'll see the poll just popped up. And with the second one, in the beginning, for me, it was quite tricky to know, okay, what framework, what thing do I put this into? I understand I have to go and talk to people, and I think you can iteratively learn and improve from that. But how do I get started? I think that was quite tricky for me when I just started off with it. And I wonder what your answers are going to be. Okay, so we got some results. So most people on Zoom at least say that yes, they use user research quite often, about 56% of the people in the call. And what do you find is the biggest challenge? We have a very exact tie here between lack of knowledge and frameworks on how to do it, and then lack of time to dedicate to it. Yes, that's a big constraint that I think a lot of us go through today, possibly always, but it feels like we have less and less time these days as any role in any company. So I completely understand that as well. But then, without any further ado, I'm going to be handing over to Tomas. So he's a product management consultant at Product People. We've been working together at Product People for more than a year now already. And at Product People, we have a nickname for Tomas, which is the machine. And I think tonight, when you hear him talk about things and how he thinks about problems and how he comes up with solutions, you kind of understand why we call him that. So without further ado, I'll be handing over to Tomas. Tomas, I'll be stop sharing and then you can start sharing and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet. It's still black on my side.
Let me check again then. Let's see, why is it not working? Let me reshare. Do you see it now?
Yes, we see it now.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. And I feel that basically this is the agenda that we have for today. And even though there are like 4 topics, I think the main thing here that I would like to talk about is one example, which we are calling here the coffee shop startup, which is like a made-up scenario and a made-up scenario, made-up company from a real-life story from one of the clients I worked with, where I'd like to talk about how actually we went deep into this user research and how it actually helped us shape the product and clear up our thinking. And then in the second and the third part of the agenda, I'd just like to briefly touch on the methodologies that we use, like that help us during the user research, and some key insights that we have at the end and that are tied to the story. So to start with the coffee shop startup, let's take an example of having like a user charging a phone. So we have a person here in a coffee shop. The person has a mobile phone and they have a low battery and they decide, okay, it would be cool to charge my phone, and they come to this like hardware device where they can put a phone and they can start charging. So for us, we are now imagining ourselves as a product manager working for this company. And what we want to do is actually launch the software part of the application. So when we initially joined, the previous PM was leaving the company in less than 3 weeks. So we needed to do a quick handover. Also, the development of this MVP for the application was ongoing already for more than a year. And we were supposed to launch the MVP in approximately 4 months. So we can say that it was a bit hectic, and that we had some kind of a challenge in front of us to actually resolve it. And as you can see, like the app has this coffee shop guy as the end user, right? And this is the B2C application. However, what we were actually working on and what we are building for this coffee shop startup is an internal B2B app that is used by a person called contract manager. And that person is actually responsible for inputting the prices that the coffee shop guy has to pay after he charges his phone. So more or less seems simple, and it seems that just we are doing like a very easy onboarding. So we are just talking with contract managers. They have more or less the clear challenge. They need to find a coffee shop, sign the contract, and put the prices into the console. And when we onboarded at the startup and started to doing things, we had initial talks with them, and when they were thinking about the product, they felt confident that it's built in the right way so far, and they started sharing some insights on like some feedback on what they feel is not working well and maybe what things we should work on in the upcoming 4 months so that we are ready to launch. However, what we realized during these conversations was that this pricing model, so the prices that the end user in the B2C app needs to pay, are currently pretty simplistic. Here we have some kind of an image that we can model and map more or less to these prices. Like we can say that the MVP at the time when we joined had like this one field where it was price per energy consumed. So the more energy you use, the more you pay. And also the more time you spend charging, you also pay. So these were two simple things, and we felt that when the contract manager signed contracts with the coffee shops, that this would be sufficient for the MVP launch, and that we would be able to continue with the application that we've inherited from the previous PM. However, what we learned about this is that it wasn't, we already started getting the impression that it wasn't enough, and that there are actually additional things affecting the price, and that we actually need to work a bit more to understand what are the requirements and why the pricing can change. And why we felt this is actually important, because if we don't have the accurate pricing and there are some variation to the requirements, then in the end, the company makes less money. So we are losing revenue and we have lower margins. And also in that regard, we have a less competitive pricing than our competitors. So we felt that it was quite a big problem to tackle, and something that we really need to understand deeper. So we started to talk more and more with other contract managers, and we realized that, okay, each contract manager has its own region. So for example, one person can be covering the whole the US, and the other person could be covering the DACH region, and the other person could be covering the Scandinavian region. And all of these people, when we talked with them, they had their own way of working, which was slightly different, and their own way of signing contracts with the coffee shops. And when they would do so, they use different terminology, and they weren't fully clear on the differences between themselves. So for example, we noticed that even though we thought that pricing per time is one part of the application we need to have, we realized that sometimes there is also a starting fee. So whenever a user starts charging the phone, immediately he gets a fee. Or for example, the user can have the first 10 minutes free, which is then again an additional requirement. So as we were talking more and more with them, we realized that there are certain things missing, and that if we don't include these things, as mentioned, we would lose revenue. And that's where we actually went very deep into the problem. And rather than just talking with the users, which helped us, we realized that their primary motivation is actually to sign more contracts. It's not to help us build exactly the best product. Even though that was their motivation, they had a different primary job to be done. And for us as product managers, our most important job to be done is to build a great product that enables the customer. And to do so, we realized that we cannot only rely on their feedback. So if we have one user research call a week for an hour, that is just not enough for us to launch in 4 months and to actually be able to build a good product. So we decided to step into the user shoes and actually think like a user. And we got access to all the contracts that the contract managers were looking into. So meaning more than 100 contracts. Luckily for us, we had a specific part of the contract we were looking into, so we didn't actually have to read through the whole contract, but we were mostly focused on the pricing aspect. And basically, by reading the contract and changing our model and the mental model we had about the problem that we are solving, we were able to understand whatever the nuances and differences in terminology and differences in requirements per every region. So that maybe the difference between the DACH and the Scandinavian region, and for us to help us build a product that actually can fit for the needs of all the markets that we are serving. And based on that, we would then come up with a new mockups with a designer and then test back our hypothesis on the solutions with the contract managers and actually use these slots now more for user testing and tweaking what we found by reading the contract. And this helped us launch in the end the MVP. And the key outcome there is that not only did we launch the product and that we were able to onboard X coffee shops from all the regions, it was also the important aspect of having more accurate pricing, because the contract managers were able to fill out more or less all of the requirements they had, and which in the end helped increase the revenue for the coffee shop startup. And while we were doing this, we used different methodologies that helped us and that clarified our thinking. One of them, of course, is design thinking. As you probably more or less know, design thinking is used to tackle like extremely complex problems. And for us specifically, it was very helpful because it helped us frame the conversation around the problem and around the user. So we were able to first go talk with the user, step into their shoes, understand the problem well, then get these insights. So to see what actually we can extract from what we have learned, and then come to the point that we talk with a designer, we ideate among the possible solutions, create some kind of a high fidelity prototype, and then come back again with the contract managers and get their feedback. And we were repeating this double diamond process a lot of times before we actually went into the development. So while we were doing so, it really helped us frame what we are doing in the process. The other thing which helped, and this helped mostly when we actually talked with the users and we were doing the user research, was the book Mom Test. In fewest words possible, I think it's the book that helps ask right questions so that you can get the feedback you want from the customers. And as the name suggests, it's about even how you can ask the questions to your mother so that she doesn't lie and that she responds in a way that helps you build the right product. And for us specifically, it was useful because we were asking about the contract manager's way of working and way of doing things compared to what we think is really the solution. Also, we were asking about the past specific behavior and not something that's coming up in the future and that is more hypothetical. And in the end, that we always keep in mind that we should shut up as much as possible and listen more to the user. And the last thing I say is the user persona. In a way, it's a high-level description of the user, and in our case, it's about the contract manager. So the contract managers had differences among themselves, but in a way, they had these similarities. And one of the most important similarities for us was understanding their goal and job to be done, and that was actually signing contracts with all the coffee shops. For example, for Anna, it was the coffee shops in Germany. And why is it important for them? Is because they are earning commission per every contract signed. So that's why we had also a lot of empathy for the user, because when they are doing the user research, they are not doing their primary job. They have a different goal, and that we have to respect that goal and try to work with them in a way that suits them the best, and that in the end we can come up and build a great product. Important thing to note is that this approach is the approach should not be the same for every type of company. So I like this visualization of 5 ways to build $100 million business. Of course, there are more than 5 ways, but I think it illustrates good the point that you can focus on one hand on smaller set of customers that pay more. In this sense, it would be the elephants, or you can spend more time trying to get a lot of customers that are paying less, which is in a way like hunting flies. And in our scenario, what we were doing was actually more similar to hunting elephants, because we had smaller number of users that were shaping our product in a bigger way. So that's why we focused more on the user research compared to maybe other techniques. So I feel that this approach here is very important when we are talking about the segment of when we have few customers, and most likely this is some kind of a B2B scenario compared to B2C scenario where we have more customers and there are much more voices in the market, and we are trying to segment them and understand their needs maybe through different techniques, like gathering more like quantitative data compared to the qualitative data that we were getting in our context. So to sum up, I'd like to add like four key insights that I'd like you to take from this presentation, and which basically helped us understand the problem and build a better product. So the first one is the importance of understanding the user needs and how deep we need to go to actually understand what we need to build. For us, I didn't expect that we would at the end be even reading the contracts and actually in a way stepping really into the shoes of the contract manager and feeling like we are even doing their job, so that we can understand well enough what are we actually building and what do we want to solve for them. The next point is that it's important that, okay, we can go into the user shoes, but we are not users. We are still not users, which means that everything that we discover is an assumption that needs to be validated later on with the user. And that while we are doing this, it's all about iterations. So it's constantly discovering the problem, having the hypothesis, and then doing iterations of testing it with the users to actually come up with a solution that fits them well. And in the end, all of this brings us the competitive advantage, because as we are learning so much about the user, we are able to build a better product and in the end, compete better on the market. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'd open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Tomas. Before we open it completely to questions, I'm going to give you some time to think about what the questions are that you want to ask. And in that time, I'm just going to go back to the presentation. In that time, this will be about a minute and a half. I'll just quickly again talk about product people to give you some time. And then at the end, there'll be a screen that you can go and apply or go to our newsletter. So some of the use cases when you can engage us, that is when you need an interim product manager or product coach or product leader, and when you need to do some discovery or run a no-code or low-code MVP or pilots. And then some of the clients that we've worked with before, B2C clients, here's a list of them, and we're pretty proud to have worked with them. And then also B2B clients, here's also a few names that we're very, very proud to have worked with. And then some of the product people stats is we have helped about 200 cross-functional teams. We are about 42 product leaders and product managers. And a stat that we're pretty proud of is that 62% of our team is made up of women, and 66% is made in the leadership is also made up of women. This is our team. And at the bottom, you see there's a little extra spot there. If you wanted to be a part of product people, we are hiring. So you can scan this image here to the left to see our hiring page. And if you'd like to be part of the subscription list for our newsletter, you can also scan the picture here on the right and it'll take you to the subscription list. Great. I hope I've given you enough time to think of some of your questions. Thomas, I also just want to say thanks for the presentation. I think it was really good and you really thought about it very clearly. And I think you did a good job in showing that to us. I have some questions while we just wait for some people. You mentioned somewhere in the beginning of the presentation that you were talking to people, but you kind of realized that just talking to them was not really enough at that point, because you started seeing that maybe the things that they needed were maybe slightly different than what makes a great product, right? And what would actually make this product work better. So how did you decide which things to prioritize or which things to focus on if there was maybe some bit of a disconnect between these two?
I think what helped us a lot is talking with multiple contract managers so that we were able to understand different perspectives and have a clear goal in mind. And the goal for us, at least in this aspect of the product, was to enable them to input as much as possible information about the pricing. So with more detail that we had, the better the pricing that we could show to the end user, and the better we could work with the margins. So coming from this goal and having the feedback from different contract managers helped us to get a clear picture of what's important and what we need to do to actually impact the business.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And then there was also, there's two things that I want to talk about on some of those last slides. There was the user persona that you showed us. And I think a lot of people kind of, when they see some of these preparatory steps for discovery and understanding stuff, they kind of get put off because they feel like, oh, there goes another rabbit hole of another 5 months that you're going to spend on uncovering this. So when is the point where you know, okay, I've talked to enough people, I understand this person now, this is our persona? When do you get to that point and you can move on and start delivering some stuff?
I feel that you are constantly learning, and that there is never a point where you feel you are satisfied with the amount of information you have. For me, at least, if we can focus on the minimum, I'd say it's talking at least to 3 customers to get some kind of impression, which is also very low, but at least helps to give you some different perspectives to start painting the picture of how the user persona might look like. And then as you are progressing, you are just increasing your knowledge. But I don't feel that there's a point like that you feel, okay, this is enough, I know everything. I just feel that as product is evolving, you will get additional context and additional dimensions of the product that you need to build, and that you will, at the end, will need to learn more. That's why I felt that for us, it was important to understand what's their primary goal so that we can enable them to achieve that goal.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Thomas. So it's like 3 would be your minimum, but there would also be a point where you're going into too much, right? Where some of us can sometimes fall in that trap where it's like, we've spoken to 40 people who's this type of person and we're still going on because we don't know everything yet, you know. There would be a point where you can say, we know enough to start moving forward.
Yeah, I feel it's quite interesting if you find the time to talk with 40 people. It's yeah.
Yes. And then Thomas, we have a question from Hector on Zoom. They're saying, when it comes to the double diamond, I have issues reducing the time spent on the first diamond. The second one, using Scrum, you can limit to 2 weeks, for instance. How can you balance both diamonds?
Well, of course, it depends on your challenge, but in the beginning, we are trying to understand the problem. So I feel as you are talking with a user, you are trying to understand something, like learn something from them. And immediately as you are learning this, you can talk with the designer and maybe already also get the technical constraints and try to see how the solution is going to look like before you even start the development. So maybe a short answer is that focusing on what you want to learn, and then when you feel you've learned that, immediately going into some kind of a solutioning and maybe creating prototypes and then testing back, so that you don't do the user research for sake of doing it, but rather that you are focused on the things you want to learn.
Thank you, Thomas. And then kind of based on that as well, to help you practically move forward in this first diamond, what are like one of the, let's say, top 3 or top 4 tools that you can suggest people to use within that first diamond while you're busy getting user insights and things like that, that it's not just all in a Word document somewhere and you still need to, or everything's in your brain. How do you get it to a place where you can have a tool that helps you to more quickly get to that point of, this is what we learned, this is what you're going to do, this is the next steps? Do you have some of those tools that you can suggest?
When you say a tool, do you mean like a software tool that helps with note-taking during user research, or?
Could be that. It could be, let's say, a Notion page where you put data into the top part of stuff that you're finding out, where you make, like, let's say, open text in the body, but you add data points to the top and you build views out of that, which makes it quick and easy for you to show this is the major problem, this is what we need to focus on. Or do you use opportunity solution trees, or is there any types of tools that you use to make this part go a little bit quicker yet still quite sciencey?
Yeah, I feel maybe with opportunity solutions trees we are going in another direction, and then I think they can be like a starting point for why are you even doing user research. And then when you are actually doing user research, I feel the Momtez book is something I find very helpful, and I always try to think about it a bit before actually doing user research. And I feel that the book also outlines like techniques and how you can structure the conversation. So I'd say that there you can find most very useful information. If that helps.
Cool, thanks, Thomas. And then on one of your last slides, you mentioned that a user research process cannot be just like replicated between different companies. You have to adjust it to make sure that it works for the company that you're working in. Is there certain like health indicators, like red flags, that will show us our process needs to be adapted, needs to be changed? What are those things that we can see it's not working for us, we need to change this?
Well, I'd say that when you mentioned, for example, that you are talking with 40 users, like if you had like a scenario like that where you feel you need to talk to 40 users, maybe that can be a sign that maybe you are in more like situation where you have a lot of users and that you actually need to get some quantitative information compared to trying to talk with everyone and get their feedback. And that maybe based on this quantitative information, you can form some hypothesis about like some number is not showing like conversion rate is not well. Maybe we can check with couple of users our hypothesis of why we feel the conversion rate is not good, and then switch to the more qualitative approach.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Thomas. And Thomas, it also seems like we don't have any other questions, and I think we've also kind of gotten to the end part of the presentation too, so our timing works out quite perfectly. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation today with us, Thomas, and some of your knowledge. We really appreciate it. And well, me and Leo will see you tomorrow.
Of course. And thank you, Stefan, for hosting.
You're welcome, Thomas. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great evening.